we are going to talk about Noam Chomsky's amazing theory about how we learn to speak. His theories are considered nativist because of his belief that language is an innate ability of humans. Innate means it is already existing from the time a person is born. It is inherent and is not learned. However, some theories oppose his idea, so up until now, his theory is a hot topic in debate. Um, Chomsky is a very important person in terms of the study of language. And he came up with a really interesting idea. So, in his 1957 book, Syntactic Structure, he said that we are born with a special part of our brain that helps us understand language. This means that kids can learn to speak without being taught every single word and root. So, the center idea of his theory is the language acquisition device, or the LAD. Chomsky called this special part of our brain the language acquisition device, or LAD, and he thinks that LAD is like a tool or hypothetical tool that helps children to learn language. He says that all languages in the world have some basic things in common, and LAD helps us understand these common parts. So there are key factors of LAD. First is the presence or is the optimal learning age. So Chomsky thinks that kids learn languages best when they are between 3 to 10 years old. During this time, they are really good at picking up new languages. Then second, he says that child doesn't need a trigger to begin language acquisition. It happens on its own. Meaning, kids learn language naturally without needing someone to teach them every single word. And lastly is that it doesn't matter if child is corrected, still grasp the language in the same manner and speak the same way. So let's just say that even if they make mistakes, they still learn to speak well. There are some clarifications in LAD so that people will not misunderstood it. First, LAD is not a real thing that we can see in our brains. It is more like an idea that helps us understand how our brain works. Then, Chomsky stated that LAD is uniquely human trait and cannot be found in animals. That's explained why it is only humans that can communicate through language. And plus is that LAD doesn't just help us learn one language. Instead, it helps us learn any language. So how does LAD works or actually works? So first, LAD works in 3 steps. First is activation, second, discovery and matching. hearing speaks, people speak around us turns on or activates the LAD. Then, kids starts to figure out the rules of their language, like how words go together and how sentences are built. Then finally, the LAD compares the rules it already knows to the rules of the language the child is learning. So, that's how LAD actually works. For in the last slides, we talk about how LAD works. Now, let's talk about how child forms sentences with the LAD. So, there are three categories: the input, LAD, and the output. So, in the input, it says primary linguistic data or the adult speech. This is the language a child hears around them. It is the raw materials they are exposed to. Think of it as all the words, sentences, and sounds they hear from their parents, siblings, and everyone else. Then, LAD. In LAD, there are two processes: general language principle. In here, the LAD is the innate ability in a child's brain that helps them understand the basic structure of language. It is like the blueprint for understanding how language works. And part of LAD also is the grammatical knowledge or the rule. So the LAD uses this innate knowledge to analyze the input and extract the rules of grammar. It is like the LAD is figuring out the patterns in the language and creating set of rules based on those patterns. Then lastly is the output. So the output of the LAD's work is the child's speech. It is easy to understand that when the child produce sentence on its own, on his or her own, and try to communicate. That's when output comes. In simplest term, imagine a child listening to their parents. The LAD is like a little language detective in their brain. It is constantly listening and analyzing the language it hears. It uses its innate understanding of language to figure out the rules of grammar. Once it has good grasp of the rules, the child can start to speak and create their own sentences. That's just how child forms sentences with the LAD, with the help of LAD. So next. So by saying that language is an innate faculty, Chomsky implies that children are born with a set of rules about language in their head, which he calls the universal grammar. So universal grammar is the set of innate principles and adjustable parameters that are common to all languages. This means that all humans are born with a basic understanding of how language works, and that understanding is similar across all languages. That's just an explanation for that. Then, universal languages focuses on the structural relationships rather than the linear order of the word. This means that the meaning of a sentence is determined by the relationship between the words rather than just the order in which they appear. There is an example here. Your cat is friendly, and is your cat friendly? We know that the first sentence is not in the right or is not in the proper word construction or sentence construction. So the example given illustrate this point. Both sentences have the same word, but the order is different. However, the meaning is the same because um, the relationship between the words are the same. So whatever it whatever the construction of the words, but the order gives the same meaning. It's just the same for us. We can still understand the message of the sentence. Now, moving on. So, universal grammar principle. So, we have listed here two principles. Language is organized that depends on the structural relationships between elements in a sentence. This means that the meaning of a sentence is not just determined by the order of the words, but also by how those words are related to each other within the sentence structures. For example, for example, the sentence "the cat chased the mouse" has different meaning than "the mouse chased the cat," even though they use the same words. Language usually contains NP and VP plus other phrases. This just refers to the basic building blocks of sentences in most language. This just means that all languages have basic parts like nouns and verbs that that make up sentences. So, there are parameters of universal grammar. Even though all languages have some rules in common, the specific ways in which those rules are used can vary from language to language. For example, some languages put the verb at the beginning of the sentence, while others put it at the end. So that's just parameters of universal grammar. It measures the differences among how we use languages, but still carries the universality of grammar. So additional knowledge, the pivot grammar. So pivot grammar is the early grammar of child language. Kids also learn a simple way to speak before they learn all the rules of their language. Now let's move on to the criticisms of Chomsky's language acquisition device and universal grammar. So let's first focus on the criticism faced by the LAD. So lack of empirical evidence. Critics argue that LAD as a specific localized brain module lacks of concrete neurological evidence. Second is overemphasis on innateness. Critics suggest that the LAD overemphasizes innate factors and underestimates the role of environmental input and learning mechanisms. Uh, Then, last is the difficulty in testing. The LAD being a hypothetical mental structures is difficult to test directly. Researchers cannot directly observe or manipulate the LAD to confirm its existence or functions. Then, the criticisms on universal grammar. So, first on the list is the limited cross-linguistic evidence. Critics points out that the universal grammar's claim of universality is challenged by the vast of diversity languages. Next is the overemphasis on syntax. Universal grammar focuses heavily on syntax, sometimes neglecting other aspects of language development such as semantics and pragmatics. Lastly is the difficulty in testing, just like in the LAD. Now, a criticism for both LAD and UG. So, some people say that Chomsky's theories are too simple. They think that learning language is much more complicated than just having a special part of our brains. They also say that Chomsky doesn't explain why some kids learn to speak faster than others, and he doesn't explain how languages change over time. Educational implications. So, first, as a foundation for language learning. Chomsky's ideas are important for teaching kids language. We should remember that kids already have some knowledge about language when they are born. We should teach them about how language works, not just give them the list of words to memorize. And we should make sure that kids have lots of opportunities to hear and choose language in real life situations. That's next, educational implications too in terms of teaching. So, in terms of teaching, there are a lot of ways we can consider. When we teach language, we should make it fun and interesting, of course. We should also think about how each kid each kid learns best. That's when individualized learning comes. And we should encourage kids to try new things with language even if they make mistakes. Just like what we are always saying, that experience is the best teacher. In conclusion, Chomsky's LAD and UG offers a powerful explanations for our innate language abilities. These theories, while debated, have significantly impacted our understanding of how language develops. However, they are not without limits. Critics argue that LAD is too vague and lacks of concrete evidence, and the universality of UG has been challenged by the diversity of languages. Despite these criticisms, LAD and UG remains valuable frameworks for exploring the fascinating phenomenon of human language acquisition. And that's all. Thank you for listening.